The reputation analysis is the first place I like to begin because this is going to simulate the actual customer journey that your users are going to go through before they buy your product. So let's take a step back and think about this, because no matter how good your ad is, generally people are not going to buy on the spot. They're going to Google you, look you up on TikTok, and go through all of your customer reviews to figure out whether or not you're legit. So by also going through this process, you're going to understand how social proof is affecting your business now, and how you can use that to your advantage. You're also going to find potential roadblocks that are keeping people from converting. And we're going to go over a few ways to mitigate that, even if you do find a few negative reviews online. And many of these discoveries will lead you to your next top performing creative. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, the way that I look at a reputation analysis is a 3-step process. Number 1, you have your press, which for some demographics is the highest form of social proof there is. And number 2, you have your review sites and your forums, like potentially blog posts or even Reddit. And number 3 is that pre-purchase feedback. So this is going to be your organic social as well as your ad comments. However, it all begins with a simple Google search. So let's start there. So what you want to do is you want to simply take a quick look at the Google search of your brand. And what are you taking away from that first glance? Do you see positive reviews? Do you see negative reviews? Are people asking if you're legit or not? Do you have reviews under the Better Business Bureau? All of those things can ultimately affect your conversion rates. And I would just stick to the first page of Google. Just get a sense of what the general sentiment of your brand is on the first page of Google. And of course, be on the lookout for any potential red flags. And once you do that, that's when you start to dive into press. Now, if you don't have any press yet because you're a new brand, do not worry. You will not be left behind here. However, I highly suggest you go through this process anyways, even potentially looking at your biggest competitor. And you don't feel like you have any competitors that are going to be in that much press, don't worry, there is also going to be a solution for you. However, if you don't have any press, this is a signal to you as the business owner or even as the media buyer. It is a worthwhile endeavor to go through the process of getting good press for your brand. And the reason why is for several demographics, especially people who are 40 plus, this is actually the highest form of social proof. Think about it. You're going to trust a brand a heck of a lot more if they've been featured in Vogue or in Forbes versus if they haven't. Essentially, press makes a brand seem way more legit. And there's also the added benefit of having some organic eyeballs and traction. However, that does tend to die off after a certain amount of time, which is why you can continue to benefit from your press if you learn how to utilize it in your ad creative, even long after those articles were published. All you really have to do here, if you don't have a list of press for your brand already, is simply do a Google search and look in the news tab of Google. And here you're going to be looking for potentially interesting articles that you can reuse in your advertising. But I would also keep your eye out for any legitimacy cues that press might be signaling about your brand. And when I'm doing this process for my brands, I'm literally just taking note of every single one and pulling out the golden nugget reviews. And when I'm doing this for my brands, I will actually take note of the most interesting articles that I might want to reuse in advertisements. Now, this research alone can result in top performing creative. In fact, even though this press screenshot ad really looks like simple stuff, I've seen this perform incredibly well across industries. And what I will say here is I do think it's okay to alter the title a little bit so that it's most relevant to you. But I would try to use words from the actual article, but you can cut them down a bit to be more succinct. Something that I want to note here is sometimes Facebook will actually flag your creatives if it looks like you're using navigation bars. Essentially, they don't want people to think that they can click on the advertisement and immediately go right to that ad. So even something as simple as a hamburger bar or a button that is inside of the actual ad creative unit, Facebook might flag that and take it down. But don't worry, there's plenty of other ways to format those type of creatives. If you want to take a look at more press ads, I do have a 4-play board that I am sharing with everyone who purchased this course. And the cool thing is I update these several times a week, so you're also going to start to see new things over time. And in addition to the press screenshot ads, there are a few other ways that you can utilize press in your ad creatives. You can also extract testimonials as text overlay over top your favorite images or videos, or even just utilize the press and logo in your overall creative. Again, this can be done both with images and video creative. Now, there are endless ways to utilize your press, but this is absolutely a strategy that you need to test out so that your customers know that they can trust you. Of course, being featured in something like Vogue or the New York Times or the New York Post isn't an outright endorsement, but it often signals to potential customers that it is. And for brands that don't have any press, don't worry, I didn't forget about you. I think a really good solution that I've seen work for several brands is actually to take your blog posts and utilize the same press screenshot format format. I've also seen a few brands do mock news ads, kind of like this and this. Could be a try. Another thing I would test out here potentially is trying like a native Twitter style ad. I've seen some brands recreate this and overlay with UGC, like the Perfect Gene and Cuts. I've also seen some B2B brands just legitimately take screenshots of Twitter. And while I'm not an advocate of ever faking press if you're not actually featured in that publication, I do think that there's a little bit more flexibility when using something like a Twitter post like this. Again, I'm always adding to this press foreplay board, which you have access to. So maybe take a look after this lesson and see if there's something that you want to recreate. Quick thing about that foreplay board, just to note, not everything here is a top performer, and I don't actually think everything here is a top performer. But you can always take a look right here to see how long an ad creative has been running. The general sentiment is, the longer that it's been running, the better it's performing. Let's move on to the second part of your analysis. Reddit, blogs, and review sites. And essentially what we want to do here is we want to understand the type of conversations that are being generated about your brand online. And we want to conduct this analysis by looking into review sites or blogs or online forum communities like Reddit. So these review sites are going to be things like My Subscription Edition, The Skim, and candidly, these things may or may not have been paid for by the brand. And because of that, I don't consider them to be as highly regarded as press, which can also sometimes be paid for, but generally that tends to feel a little bit more organic, and you maybe paid a PR agency to have that placement. But yeah, these review sites tend to come with a little bit of skepticism from viewers, from my experience. And that's why I lump it into the same category as Reddit or other online forums. I like to think of it in terms of trust levels. Essentially, people may not trust these things as much as they trust press, but it's still valuable information, and for some demographics, they are going to be weighing what things like Reddit say in even higher regard than press. So let's start with the review sites. We're going to use Magic Spoon as an example for this. It's easy to Google this and have this stuff pop up immediately. Here we have the New York Times, Amazon reviews, and then we start to find things that are in this review site genre, like the Quality Edit, the Skim, and I can also see tons of different blogs here, things testing Nestwell. Anything that generally says my honest Magic Spoon review, is it worth $10 per box? That's the kind of vibe that I'm thinking of. And let's get to it. Is it good? All in all, it's truly magical. Okay. What about what the Skim says? Our official review. Straight A's in flavor, crunch satisfaction, room for growth, texture, hardiness, cost. Cost is a big one. I think that really when you're looking through these type of review sites, what you really want to look at is the type of cons that they have, because this might be an opportunity to create an ad that is actually helping them to overcome their objections. Kind of like this overnight oats ad. Another tip that I have here is to go ahead and happen to Amazon here, but don't go through the testimonials just yet. I would actually take a look and see what type of questions people are asking in Amazon. And the reason why I like to look at that at this stage is because those people haven't bought yet, and those are likely the questions that your customers have at this part of the journey. Okay, now let's dive into Reddit. Reddit is my favorite place to understand the reputation perception of a brand in a candid way. To put it bluntly, Redditors can be ruthless and very helpful for creative strategy. So essentially what you want to look for here is positive and negative sentiments about your brand, but also look out for how people are discovering them and what their authentic experience was with the brand, and if they're enthusiastically suggesting it to others or not. Look for their pain points, their whys, negative sentiments, positive sentiments. Now, what type of ads can you make from a Reddit analysis? There's tons of things you could do here. So if you see a negative sentiment popping up again and again, or a specific objection, that would be a really good opportunity for you to make an ad creative. Now, you don't necessarily have to call out Reddit. Rest assured, your users are seeing those reviews there. But if you develop a creative that speaks to that, that's going to be a really interesting test to see if it improves your conversion rates. And now another thing I've been testing at is an actual Reddit format ad, which I think is actually really important for brands to test if they know that they have segments of their demographics and customers that are huge Redditors. And once you've done this analysis, it's now time to go to the third part of the reputation analysis. Regardless of whether you work for an agency or in-house at a brand, or if you're the founder of a brand, it's really important to understand how organic social media fits into your overall strategy. And first, it starts at the platform level. What platforms are you even active on? For many brands, this is mostly Instagram, but increasingly TikTok TikTok is also a factor. So I'm going to concentrate on those two today. First, let's zoom in on Instagram. Maybe you've been told that your organic Instagram doesn't really affect your paid performance, but I've actually seen that it does. Especially for brands that spend heavily on Instagram, this is where users are going to check you out initially. It's a really common user flow to getting an ad on Instagram, to following them and checking out their posts, or even just following them on the spot so you can go more in depth later. So here are some things that I'm looking for. What's the overall content strategy on these organic platforms? Are there reels? Are there videos? What type of images are they using? Is there anything here that we can potentially take and repurpose for the paid channel? Oftentimes, yes. I find that for a lot of brands, the organic social media team is completely separate from the growth team. So there's a lot of things that fall in between the cracks. I'm also evaluating what is going on in the comments section on the organic posts, because this is ultimately going to reflect how they're curating their organic community. And for some brands, unfortunately, a number of big brands, they just do a post and call it a day. They aren't really responding thoughtfully to comments or generating a discussion. And this tends to cause people to air their grievances about a brand right inside of the comments section, which in turn can make the brand look negligent or even scammy. However, for other brands, you can see that they do an amazing job of curating and tending to their community. And ultimately, this is going to give people a lot more confidence to buy from you. So let's take a look at Leaf Shea, which is one of my favorite brands because they do organic social media excellently. It's a masterclass. So I want to take a look at, okay, who's commenting? Are they potential buyers? Are they people that bought? Or are they customers who are just giving reviews? Or are they potential buyers, people who just bought and are really excited to receive the product? Or are they customers who are giving their reviews? How is the brand responding to those comments? Are they responding to all of them? How? How thoughtful are they about the response? Or are they just giving lazy replies and hearting it? Here's an example of a brand that doesn't really do it super well. Number one, they're not getting thoughtful comments from their users. But to be frank, it's the brand's fault because the brand is not encouraging it. And you can see here, some people are looking for updates on shipping. It's pretty tough. And I think the best thing you can do, especially in the comment section, is really trying to engage in a back and forth with your Now, I think the best thing that you can do is really try to engage in a back and forth here. And the more that you can draw out information from your users, the more that you're ultimately going to be able to get those golden nuggets that then you can repurpose into amazing ad content. But more on that later. Now let's talk a little bit about TikTok. Many demographics are utilizing TikTok as a search engine, and they are evaluating whether or not they're going to buy a product based on the reviews in organic TikTok. So number one, I would take a look and see what type of reviews are being generated about your brand or even about your competitors. Sometimes even a general pulse on the industry can be really helpful here. And I would also approach this in a similar way that you approached Reddit. What's the general sentiment? What are the pain points? What are people's authentic testimonials, good or bad? Now, the final part of this section is to go through your ad comments. Ad comments are candidly one of the best sources of inspiration for ad creative for your brand. This is the best place to figure out what common objections are, like price point, common FAQs, and essentially all the information that people need before purchasing. And they're also going to let you know the general sentiment of your brand as well as your advertising. So it's great feedback. And also, wildly important, the ad comments can actually make or break the performance on your ad creative. I've seen this a million times. Sometimes if negative comments begin to pile up on an otherwise well-performing ad, that can tank performance. So if you've ever come across an ad that suddenly dips in performance overnight, you should be checking out the ad comments section as one of your first lines of defense. So get in the routine of checking these often, regardless if you're on the media buying side or really whatever role you have. In general, if you touch the ad account or if you touch the creatives, you should be monitoring this. However, I will say this, I have been working on the agency side for several years, and in my experience, it is always the brand who ends up actually managing those comments and making those replies, or deleting them, which you should absolutely be doing. A really fun fact to know is that when Glossier was at the height of advertising on Facebook ads, they actually had 6 full-time people dedicated solely to managing the ad comments. That little factoid actually came from Nick and Moyes' podcast, which I'm a huge fan of. So something that I'm always looking at in my auditing process, if people are actually responding to ad comments and if they're deleting the ones that are not helping out the brand and giving a bad image of the brand. It's kind of a brand choice. You can always reply to those, but if they're really bad and they're really negative, I would just say delete them. Barry Hott calls this vandalism on an ad. And I have seen also that if you're able to engage with positive and negative comments, this can also drive and increase the performance on ad creative, especially if you're doing it right. Now, something really fascinating that I actually saw on a recent Thrive Cosmetics ad is every time someone would comment on the ad creative, they would actually start a new comment, tag that person, and then ask them a question about what they purchased, what they were excited about with the brand, really anything. And this ended up generating tons of really amazing discussion and tons of really great inspiration for future ads for them. And ultimately, what you're looking for here is, and number one, really what you're looking for here is things that need to be monitored, things that need to be deleted, things that need to be engaged with, but you ultimately want to take note of those ultra special comments that you think would be good for advertising. Also note down common objections and pain points of your users. You're going to need them for this next section.